For generations, autism has been seen as a boys' thing, which has come at a high cost for girls. By some estimates, there could be double the number of autistic girls than is currently diagnosed. This gender bias in diagnostics has had a huge impact on the mental health of girls. So in this week's episode, we're going to bust some of the stereotypes around autism and look at how it might be showing up for your daughter. Welcome to the Zen Parent Survival Guide podcast. My name is Esther Freeman and I teach parents the principles and techniques of how my daughter went from 5 or 6 violent meltdowns a day to virtually 0. In this weekly podcast, you'll learn ways of developing a calmer family life. So why don't you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? So the reason this gender bias has occurred in autism is threefold. So the first is the way that diagnostic criteria was developed, which was basically around using a sample of men. The second reason is because we often look for the external behaviours. This is the stereotype that has appeared around autism, and this may be things like hand flapping. But with girls, they often don't display externally, but it's all going on inside for them. And that will lead to these huge mental health problems, which I will talk about a bit more later on. The third reason is because of the stereotypes that we have around girls in general. So girls are encouraged to be quiet and neat and clean. And when we see a girl doing those things, we just think she's being good at being a girl. But these behaviours may stem from autistic traits, for example, an aversion to dirt because of sensory issues. So to help you identify what is just being a girl and what might be autistic, I've got 9 top tips for you today, and I'm going to talk through them. So number 1 is repetitive behaviours. So this ties in with one of, I think, the biggest stereotypes that you have around autism. Autistic children do repetitive behaviours like hand flapping and stacking and flipping and maybe repeating words or phrases over and over. Now that is often a male presentation. When we see it in girls, because it does occur in girls as well, it might be things like hair twirling or reading a book again and again. It's very easy to dismiss these as just a girl's thing, but how often is it going on? I know they might say to you, don't compare your child to other children, but sometimes it is worth it. Is your child twirling their hair a little bit more obsessively than other girls? Are they completely obsessed with that book which they've read 5 or 6 times already? Just keep an eye on it, and when you look at some of the other things that we will talk about, see how it compares. So the next number 2 we're going to look at is friends. Again, there's this stereotype of the autistic person as having no friends, but with girls they might have friends. They might in fact have one really super close friend. But look at how they are in groups. How are they managing in groups of children? This could be a telltale sign that your daughter is autistic. It might also be their relationship to friends. So maybe they do have a few friends, but maybe there's an ambivalence around that friendship. Maybe they float from one group to one friend to another, never really thoroughly investing in any. My daughter's best friend is autistic, and it was quite interesting that when she moved away, she moved right to the other side of the country. Her mother told me that there was just this slight ambivalence around leaving the friendships and then making new friendships. It wasn't that she didn't care and didn't miss my daughter, but it didn't seem to be showing quite as strongly as it did in my daughter, or indeed her younger sister who is neurotypical. She was able just to kind of slot back into the school, and in that school she then started floating around between children never really making any strong friendships. So autistic girls will have friends, but it's the way that they behave with those friendships. And you have to remember there may be a lot of masking going on with these friendships. They've learned how to behave by watching and copying others, so they can seem to socially fit in. This tends to happen much more with girls than boys. And this leads us on to point 3, which is mental health. Now, I've cheated here a little bit because the next 3 points are actually going to be around mental health, but I wanted to just start off talking about it quite generally. So as I said before, girls can spend a lot of time masking. They've learned how they're meant to be fitting in and they are copying those behaviours, but this is not something that comes naturally to them, and it could be causing them a lot of hard work and stress and overwhelm to keep it up day in, day out. So the mental health issues might show in different ways through the ages. So when they're very young, it might show as shyness and separation anxiety. So obviously when children are very small, those are quite typical behaviours you would see. But if your child is still showing a fear of other adults and an unwillingness to maybe let go of you at preschool age, then this might be a sign of autism. As they get older, it may display as school refusal because of all the work they're having to do to fit in both in the classroom and in the playground. This is exhausting and it can lead to burnout, and that can lead to not wanting to go to school because of how exhausting school is. Now, obviously, school refusal can appear in both boys and girls and for different reasons, but one of the key reasons that it appears in autistic girls is just the stress and strain of masking all day. As your child gets older, maybe heading towards adolescence, you might see it start to occur in much more troubling behaviours such as self-harm or eating disorders. Again, this all comes from a stress and strain from keeping up appearances and trying to fit in. And this may be conscious or subconscious. They may have learned that I shouldn't show my autistic side because people will think I'm weird, or maybe it's happening at a subconscious level of just having this feeling that this is what I need to do in order to fit in. So one of the things I think is really encouraging is the number of autistic young women who are now coming out and celebrating their autism. So if you are concerned about your daughter masking, maybe have a look at some videos on YouTube for young women who are celebrating their differences, and maybe this will help ease some of the pressure. But definitely look out for those mental health issues that might be a sign that actually they're an autistic person trying to fit in to a neurotypical world. A couple of other ways that I think mental health issues show up in autistic people, particularly girls, is with controlling behaviour. So when your child is playing with their friends, do they always need to be in charge? Do they always need to be the one choosing their game and telling other people what to do? This is seen as an autistic trait, but I think it stems from anxiety, because when you don't understand social communication, social and emotional relationships, that can be really stressful. You don't understand what the other people's thinking. You can't predict what they're going to do next. They may do something that could be really overwhelming to you. So a way to deal with that is to control the situation. So you are going to be in charge of the game and you're going to tell everyone what you're going to do. So this controlling behaviour can appear in girls and could be a sign of autism. The third mental health issue, and confusingly the fourth on our list, is gut issues. Now, gut issues can appear in both boys and girls who are autistic. And this is because there is a there is a system in our body called the parasympathetic nervous system, and I'm not going to get into the biology of it all here because that's a whole separate podcast, but it basically links our brains to our guts. And so when we're in a state of constant over arousal, overstimulation, we're over anxiety because we're working so hard every day to fit in with this neurotypical world, that system gets really overactivated, and that can result in gut problems ranging from problems going to the toilet, constipation, to feelings of nausea and sickness, to feelings of gut issues, gastrointestinal problems, stomach aches. So all these can be a common symptom of autism, but they are linked to anxiety and those mental health issues. So moving on to point number 6 is special interest. Now this is actually a diagnostic criteria for autism and appears in both boys and girls, but it presents differently. So the stereotype of the special interest in autism is often around machines, cars, trains. I heard of an autistic child whose special interest was washing machines. Now, in girls, they will often have special interests, but they may be around animals or books. And these can often just be seen as girls' things and nothing unusual at all. However, with autistic girls, this interest will go above and beyond the typical. They will live and breathe animals. Maybe it's a special interest in horses. I know a young woman who has a special interest in horses, and she's at the stables day and night. She absolutely loves it there, and it is just her entire life. So if your daughter's interest is maybe going above and beyond, it might be a typical interest, but it's going above and beyond, then that might be a sign of autism. Point number 8 is sensory issues. And again, this can appear in boys and girls. But as I mentioned before, sometimes it can get confused with stereotypes of what girls are. I mentioned dirt. Maybe they have an aversion to dirt, and this could actually be a sensory issue because the feel of dirt on their skin, but could just easily be written off as, oh, they're neat and tidy in the way that we like girls to be. Other common sensory issues are noise and clothing. My daughter has sensory processing difficulties, and she finds it very hard to wear trousers or shorts because she doesn't like the feel of things around her waist. It feels too tight and uncomfortable. So she often wears dresses. Again, this could be written off as, oh, she's so girly, she always loves a dress and she never wears trousers. Actually, my daughter would quite like to wear trousers. We constantly, when we go out clothes shopping, she'll say, can I have these jeans? Or can I? And I just have to remind her, every time you put these on, you really struggle to wear them. And so we tend to opt for loose flowing dresses purely because of her sensory issues. She's not a particularly girly girl, it's sensory driven. The 9th point is emotional regulation. Now, this is a common autistic trait, appears in boys and girls, but sometimes due to stereotypes about girls and women as being over emotional, it can be easily to dismiss it. But what I found is that while my daughter will have emotional regulation difficulties and blowouts like other children, her ability to come down from that point is much harder than a neurotypical child. So she might blow up because, I don't know, she's had a fight with a friend at school, but she just can't bring herself back down. I found, particularly when she was younger, techniques that were supposed to bring her out of the so-called tantrum just didn't work. So giving her a hug, and actually that's going back to the sensory issues with my daughter. If she was having a meltdown, giving her a hug was the last thing you wanted to do because it triggered her sensory issues, which just overwhelmed her further. Distractions also never worked with her, and it would often take her half an hour to come out of the meltdown. That was in sharp contrast to her friends who might blow up as quickly, but would then quickly come back down and be okay again within a few minutes. So if you're noticing that your daughter is flying off the handle frequently and explosively and finding it really hard to come out of it, then this could be a sign that they are autistic. So I hope that list has given you a few things to look out for. And as I said, if you are worried but not quite ready to go and speak to a professional, I have some further support services. So I can offer you 20 minutes free parent coaching, and I can talk to you about how to prepare and who you should be speaking to get help. So if you're interested in that, there's a link in the show notes where you can book an appointment. So moving on to our section where we talk about wider issues in the world of special educational needs and disabilities, I'm actually going to keep on the theme of girls this week because there's been some interesting stats that have come out about the level of need in the country nationwide. And what that's shown is yet again another year on, and we are seeing even more children needing support. But there are two particular areas that caught my eye. And the first is mental health. So what these stats have shown is the level of mental health needs amongst girls is much higher than boys. And we've obviously just talked around some of the reasons for this. So with girls who have EHCP, a quarter of them have mental health issue listed as a need. That compares with just 11% of boys. So you can see there's a huge difference here. The other area that is quite revealing is with speech and language issues. Now, speech and language is an area that often gets overlooked, and actually is going back to the autism, is often one of the first signs of autism is speech delay and having to seek out speech and language therapy. And speech and language difficulties, they just bleed into so many different areas of our life, which is why there's such a problem. They can present difficulties with social communications, making friends, keeping friends, understanding what the teacher is saying to you, understanding the instructions you're meant to be following in the classroom. And they can also lead to emotional dysregulation issues, because there is nothing more frustrating than trying to explain something to someone who just doesn't seem to get what you're saying. I know my daughter has quite significant speech and language difficulties, and it causes her so much anxiety trying to say what she wants to say and just not being able to say it. And she also gets very stressed out because she often can't understand what people are saying to her. So with girls, the latest figures show that 19% of girls who have EHCPs have some form of speech and language difficulty, and that compares to 17.6% of boys. So that's not as big a gap as the mental health issues, but it is still a gap, and it's quite interesting because special educational needs has been a community that has been dominated by boys. If you go to a special school, you'll see way more boys there than girls. But we can see in these key areas that girls are really needing support. So that brings us to the end of this week's episode. I hope you found something useful in there. Just a reminder, if you would like to take advantage of that 20 minutes free one-to-one parent coaching with me to talk about some of the things that you might be seeing in your daughters or any other children, I can just give you a bit of parent-to-parent advice on how you might want to be capturing evidence, who you should speak to, and how to get the best results out of those meetings. And remember, I've got some more tips coming up next week on another topic related to special educational needs and disabilities, so make sure you are subscribed to the show so you don't miss an episode. And finally, if you've enjoyed this week's episode, why not give me a 5-star rating and a review? What this does is it helps other parents find the show, and then they'll be getting the support they need. So why not give other families a helping hand? I'll see you next time. If you'd like to learn some more about spotting autism, particularly in very young children, you might find this video here really useful. This is spotting some of the early signs of autism, so check that out.